They say comparison is the thief of joy, but in my family, comparison was the air we breathed. My name is Diana, and at 49, I finally learned that being the good enough daughter, the one who came second in every race that mattered, taught me something my golden sister never learned: how to see clearly in the dark. This is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the greatest gift isn't being chosen first. It's learning to choose yourself when everyone else has stopped looking. The call came on a Thursday evening in September while I was reviewing quarterly reports for my accounting firm. The same accounting firm I'd built from scratch 15 years ago, client by client, spreadsheet by spreadsheet, while my family celebrated my sister Victoria's latest artistic triumph. Mom's voice carried that familiar note of gentle crisis, the tone she reserved for conversations about Victoria's life falling apart again. "Diana, I need to ask you a favor. Victoria is having some financial difficulties, and she's asked if she could stay with you for a few months while she gets back on her feet." I set down my pen and looked out the window of my home office, watching the evening light filter through the maple tree I'd planted when I bought this house. The house I'd chosen, mortgaged, and furnished entirely on my own, while Victoria lived in a series of borrowed spaces funded by her art sales and, more often, by family bailouts. "What kind of financial difficulties?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be the same story we'd heard for 25 years. "Oh, you know how it is with creative types. The gallery that was representing her work closed unexpectedly, and she has some outstanding loans. Nothing she can't handle, but she needs a little time to regroup." If you've ever been the practical daughter, the one everyone calls when dreams meet reality and the bills come due, you know the weight of being reliable in a family that celebrates being unpredictable. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of women who understand that being second choice doesn't mean being second best, because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one who sees everything. Victoria had been the family's shining star since we were children. Artistic, dramatic, blessed with the kind of effortless beauty that made strangers turn their heads and parents beam with pride. While I was getting straight A's and helping Dad with his tax preparation business, Victoria was painting watercolors that made Mom cry with joy and performing in school plays that Dad attended with his chest puffed out like a proud peacock. The family narrative was simple and never questioned. Victoria was the creative one, the free spirit who needed protection and support to flourish. I was the practical one, the dependable one who would always be fine because I was so capable and so organized. What no one seemed to notice was that being so capable meant I'd been taking care of myself since I was 12 years old. Making my own lunches, doing my own laundry, managing my own schedule while Mom drove Victoria to art classes and Dad bragged about her latest painting to anyone who would listen. "She just needs a quiet place to work on her portfolio," Mom continued. "You have that extra bedroom, and Victoria always says your house has such good light." Victoria had been to my house exactly 3 times in the 15 years I'd owned it. Each visit had lasted less than 2 hours, usually ending with her receiving a phone call about some exciting opportunity that required her immediate attention. But she'd noticed the light. Of course she had. "How long is a few months, Mom?" "Well, it's hard to say exactly. These things take time. You know how the art world works." I didn't know how the art world worked, and neither did Mom. But we both knew how Victoria worked. She moved through life assuming that solutions would appear, that someone would always step in to handle the details, that the universe owed her beauty and creativity a comfortable existence. "I'll need to think about it," I said. "Oh, Diana, you know Victoria. She won't be any trouble. She's very independent." Victoria was many things: charming, talented, magnetic in the way that drew people to her like moths to flame. But independent wasn't one of them. At 45, she had never paid her own rent for an entire year, never handled her own insurance, never managed a budget that lasted longer than 3 months. "I'll call you back tomorrow," I said. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, looking at the photos on my refrigerator. Pictures from my hiking trips, my book club, my volunteer work at the literacy center. A quiet life, carefully built, consciously chosen. A life that Victoria had once described as sweet, but so limited. Limited. The word had stung when she'd said it, not because it was cruel, but because part of me had wondered if she was right. While Victoria traveled to artist residencies and open gallery shows, I stayed in the same small city where we'd grown up, building a business that helped local families manage their finances, buying a house 3 blocks from our childhood home. But looking at those photos, I saw something Victoria had never learned to see: contentment that came from building something lasting, joy that didn't depend on other people's applause, security that couldn't be disrupted by a gallery closing or a patron losing interest. I called Mom back the next morning. Victoria can stay for 3 months. After that, she needs to have a plan for where she's going next. Oh, wonderful. She'll be so relieved. She's been worried sick. Victoria arrived on a Sunday afternoon with 7 suitcases, 2 easels, and a conviction that my guest bedroom would be perfect for a temporary studio. She swept through my house like a force of nature, rearranging furniture to accommodate her art supplies, opening all the curtains to let the creative energy flow, and immediately filling my quiet space with the particular brand of controlled chaos that had always surrounded her. "Diana, this place is exactly what I needed," she said, standing in what had been my peaceful guest room and was now draped with canvases and bristling with brushes. I can already feel the inspiration coming back. I watched her survey her new domain with the satisfaction of someone who had never doubted that space would be made for her wherever she went. "I'm glad it works for you. You're such a lifesaver. I don't know what I would have done without you." But even as she said it, we both knew she would have found something. Victoria had been finding solutions her entire life, or rather, solutions had been finding her. Parents, lovers, friends, patrons. Someone always stepped in. The first month was surprisingly pleasant. Victoria was charming company when she wanted to be, and she seemed genuinely grateful for the refuge I'd provided. She cooked elaborate meals with ingredients I'd never heard of, told stories about the art world that made my quiet life seem exotic by comparison, and filled the house with a creative energy that was, I had to admit, invigorating. But by the second month, the familiar patterns began to emerge. Victoria's morning painting sessions stretched into the afternoon, filling the house with the smell of turpentine and the sound of music that made phone conferences impossible. Art supplies migrated from the guest room to the kitchen table, the living room coffee table, the bathroom counter. When I gently suggested that she might want to contain her work to the designated space, she looked hurt. "I thought you understood what creative work requires," she said. "I can't just turn inspiration on and off like a faucet." Friends began stopping by at all hours, fellow artists, gallery owners, collectors who wanted to see Victoria's latest work. My quiet weekends became impromptu salons where wine flowed freely and conversations about artistic vision and the soul of creativity lasted until midnight. When I mentioned that I had early client meetings and needed the house to be quiet after 10 p.m., Victoria nodded sympathetically. Of course. I forget that not everyone has the luxury of setting their own schedule. The luxury. As if building a business that allowed me to control my time had been handed to me instead of earned through 15 years of 12-hour days and carefully managed risks. By the 3rd month, Victoria had sold 2 small paintings, enough to cover her gallery registration fees, but nowhere near enough to afford her own apartment. When I brought up our 3-month agreement, she looked genuinely surprised. "Oh, Diana, you weren't serious about that timeline, were you? I mean, things are just starting to turn around. It would be such a shame to interrupt the momentum now." "Victoria, we had an agreement. But surely you can see that this is bigger than some arbitrary deadline. I'm on the verge of a breakthrough. The gallery in Portland is very interested in representing me, and there's talk of a show in Boston next spring." There was always talk. There had been talk for 25 years, talk of breakthrough moments, important connections, opportunities that were just around the corner. Sometimes the talk materialized into real opportunities. More often, it didn't. But Victoria moved through life as if the talk itself was as valuable as the reality. "I'm happy for you," I said. "But you still need to find your own place." Victoria's expression shifted from surprise to hurt to something that looked almost like betrayal. "I can't believe you're being so rigid about this. Family is supposed to support each other. Family is also supposed to keep their commitments to each other. You sound like an accountant." I almost laughed. "I am an accountant. You know what I mean. You're treating this like some kind of business transaction instead of. I mean, I'm your sister." And there it was. The assumption that had shaped our relationship for 4 decades. Being sisters meant I was obligated to provide whatever Victoria needed, for as long as she needed it, without question or complaint. You being my sister is exactly why we need clear boundaries, I said. I love you, but I won't let you take my hospitality for granted. Victoria stared at me for a long moment, as if I'd revealed myself to be someone she didn't recognize. When did you become so hard? Hard. Another word that stung not because it was unfair, but because it contained a grain of truth. I had become harder over the years, harder to manipulate, harder to guilt, harder to convince that other people's poor planning constituted my emergency. I became hard the day I realized that being soft meant disappearing. Victoria found her own apartment 3 weeks later. Not because she'd saved enough money, but because she'd found another patron, an older man who owned several properties in the arts district and was very supportive of emerging artists. The apartment came with reduced rent in exchange for Victoria agreeing to create a mural for his coffee shop. She moved out on a Saturday morning with less fanfare than she'd moved in. Most of her art supplies had somehow become permanently integrated into my house, and she left them behind with an airy promise to come back for them soon. Thank you for everything, she said as she loaded the last suitcase into her car. This time with you really helped me get my feet under me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Because despite everything, the disruption, the boundary pushing, the casual assumption that my life could be reorganized around her needs, I would miss her. I would miss the energy she brought, the way she made ordinary Tuesday evenings feel like events worth remembering. But I wouldn't miss the feeling of being a supporting character in my own life. The house felt different after Victoria left. Quieter, yes, but also more solid somehow. As if it had settled back into its proper shape after months of being stretched to accommodate someone else's vision of how space should be used. I repainted the guest room, choosing a soft blue that made the morning light look peaceful instead of dramatic. I rearranged the furniture back to its original configuration, bought new sheets that didn't smell like turpentine, and hung the landscape prints I'd taken down to make room for Victoria's canvases. It was my space again. Small, perhaps. Limited, maybe. But wholly, completely mine. 2 months later, Mom called with another favor. Diana, Victoria's having some trouble with her new living situation. The man who owns the building is being very difficult about the mural project, and she might need to find somewhere else to stay while she sorts things out. I was quiet for so long that Mom said, "Hello? Are you there?" "I'm here." And the answer is no. No. Victoria can't stay here again. She's welcome to visit, but she can't move back in. But Diana, she doesn't have anywhere else to go. She'll figure something out. She always does. I don't understand. You used to be so generous. I looked out my office window at the maple tree, now bare for winter but still beautiful in its stark honesty. I'm still generous, Mom. I'm just more selective about how I spend my generosity. What's happened to you? You used to care about family. I still care about family. I just stopped thinking that caring about family means sacrificing myself for everyone else's convenience. The conversation ended awkwardly, with Mom making disappointed sounds and me feeling guilty in a way that was familiar but no longer compelling. I'd learned the difference between feeling guilty and being guilty, between being responsible and being responsible for everyone. Victoria found another solution, of course. She always did. This time it was an artist collective that offered shared living spaces in exchange for community participation. According to the updates I received through Mom, she was thriving there, surrounded by other creative types who understood her process and supported her vision. I was genuinely happy for her. But I was also happy for me. The holidays that year were different. Victoria's presence had always dominated family gatherings, her latest projects, her upcoming shows, her dramatic stories about the challenges of artistic life. Without her there, the focus shifted in ways that surprised me. Dad asked about my business, really asked, with follow-up questions about my clients and challenges I was facing. Mom noticed the weight I'd lost hiking and complimented the new confidence in my posture. My cousin Sarah, who'd always seemed to fade into the background at family events, revealed that she'd been writing poetry for years and asked if I'd like to read some of her work. It was as if Victoria's absence had created space for the rest of us to become more visible to each other. When Victoria finally joined us for Christmas dinner, arriving fashionably late with paint still under her fingernails and stories about her latest artistic breakthrough, I watched the family dynamic snap back into its familiar configuration. All attention turned to her, all conversation centered around her world, all energy flowed in her direction. But this time, I didn't fade into the background. I listened to her stories with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions about her work, and shared my own updates when appropriate. I participated in the Victoria show without disappearing into it. After dinner, Victoria pulled me aside. "You seem different," she said. "More present." "I feel more present. I've been thinking about what you said, about boundaries and commitments. I didn't understand it at the time, but I think I'm starting to." I looked at my sister, still beautiful, still magnetic, still carrying herself like someone who expected the world to make room for her dreams. But there was something new in her expression, a flicker of awareness that hadn't been there before. "The artist collective has rules," she continued. "Expectations. Everyone has to contribute equally, take turns with chores, respect common spaces." I hated it at first, but it's actually easier to be creative when I'm not constantly worried about disappointing someone or wearing out my welcome. When everyone knows what's expected, there's less drama. I smiled. Boundaries are freedom. I never understood that before. I thought boundaries were just people being mean. Sometimes they are. But sometimes they're people being clear about what they need to feel safe and respected. Victoria nodded slowly. "I owe you an apology. For assuming you'd always be there to catch me, and for making you feel like caring about me meant giving up pieces of yourself." The apology surprised me not because it wasn't deserved, but because Victoria had never been good at acknowledging the impact of her actions on other people. Something was shifting in her, some recognition that other people's lives were as real and complex as her own. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot. I also want you to know that staying with you wasn't just about having a place to live. It was about, I don't know, feeling connected to something stable. You've built this life that's so solid, so thoughtfully constructed. I used to think it was boring, but now I see how much strength it takes to build something lasting." I felt tears prick my eyes. In 49 years, no one in my family had ever acknowledged the strength it took to be the steady one, the responsible one, the one who showed up consistently instead of spectacularly. "I love you, Victoria. I always have. I just had to learn to love myself too." She hugged me then, and for the first time in our adult lives, it felt like a hug between equals instead of between protector and protected. 6 months later, Victoria had her first solo show in 5 years. The opening was held at a small but respected gallery in the Arts District, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't helping behind the scenes. I wasn't managing the guest list or coordinating the catering or handling the money. I was simply a guest, there to celebrate my sister's achievement. The paintings were beautiful, abstract landscapes that captured something essential about the Maine coast where we'd grown up. They were mature in a way Victoria's earlier work hadn't been, grounded in something deeper than technique or trendy aesthetics. "She's found her voice," said the gallery owner, a woman about my age who clearly understood both the business and artistic sides of the equation. "These pieces show real growth, real commitment to the craft." I stood in front of a painting that reminded me of the view from our childhood bedroom window, watching people move through the gallery space Victoria had created. She worked the room with her usual charm, but there was something different about her interactions. Less desperate, more genuine. As if she'd learned the difference between demanding attention and earning it. Near the end of the evening, Victoria found me studying a small canvas tucked in a corner, a painting of a simple house with golden light in the windows, surrounded by a garden that looked peaceful rather than wild. "That one's not for sale," she said quietly. "Why not?" "Because it's yours. If you want it." I looked closer and realized it was my house. My maple tree, my front porch, my carefully tended flower beds. But Victoria had painted it with an artist's eye, capturing something I'd never seen before, how beautiful a quietly chosen life could be. "It's called Sanctuary," Victoria said. "I painted it the last week I was staying with you, when I finally understood what you'd built there." I accepted the painting with tears in my eyes, not just because it was beautiful, but because it meant Victoria had finally seen me. Not as the practical sister, not as the backup plan, but as someone who had created something worth painting, worth celebrating, worth calling sanctuary. The evening ended with genuine triumph. Victoria sold 6 paintings, enough to support herself for months, without relying on family or patrons. More importantly, she sold them to people who understood her work, who saw in her paintings something that resonated with their own experiences. As I drove home that night, Victoria's painting carefully secured in my passenger seat, I thought about the journey from invisible to visible, from second place to self-chosen. It hadn't required dramatic gestures or angry confrontations. It had required something much more difficult: the patience to build boundaries instead of walls, the courage to stand firm without standing alone. The woman I'd become was someone I was proud to be. She knew the difference between being needed and being valued, between helping and enabling, between family loyalty and family servitude. She had learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't catching them when they fall, it's believing they have the strength to catch themselves. Most importantly, she had learned that being second choice in other people's stories didn't mean she couldn't be the hero of her own. I hung Victoria's painting in my living room, where the morning light would hit it perfectly. Every time I looked at it, I would remember that being overlooked had taught me the most valuable lesson of my 49 years. You don't need to be someone's first choice to choose yourself. And choosing yourself, it turns out, is the only choice that really matters. If Diana's journey resonates with you, if you've ever felt like the supporting character in your own family's story, or struggled with the balance between helping and enabling the people you love, know that you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story touched something in you, consider subscribing to join our community of women who are learning that being reliable doesn't mean being invisible. Sometimes the quiet strength we've built while everyone else was looking elsewhere becomes exactly the foundation we need to step into our own light.